Hi Facebook. Today is Tuesday, September 24th, 2019. I'm Angela Hooper-Menifield, and I'm here with your HR Moment from Menifield Associates. So yesterday when we talked a little bit, we talked about documentation being really important when we're trying to describe people's inability to follow instructions, because we talked a little bit about it, what was insubordination yesterday. But then we talked about, okay, that's really not what we want to say people did or did not do, but what would be more appropriate and more legally binding and would give us an opportunity to validate would be us saying that a person failed to follow instructions. And so one of the points I made in the video yesterday, and feel free to go back and watch it if you haven't already, because I think you'll find this to be very valuable, is the fact that it's clear, if we do it right, to speak on what was the instruction, what was done and what was not done, and then if there is a deficiency, a failure to do so, we can then talk about the failure to follow instructions. But one of the key things I said yesterday in that video was, if the instructions are clear and understood. So what are some of the ways that we can verify that? Well, that comes down to documentation. Because if the only way that I give instruction or tell a person what I need from them, what a deadline is orally, we're again in a he said, she said situation, right? So it's your word against mine. You say that you told me it was due on Wednesday, and I said, no, you said next Wednesday. And I've actually had that to happen because some of us, depending on, locale, where we're from, we'll say it's due next Wednesday. And we believe next Wednesday is the next Wednesday that comes. So if we're having this conversation on Monday, and we say, hey, this report is due next Wednesday. Somebody believes it's in 2 days, and I bet you somebody else thinks it's 10 days. Mark my words, because it's happened to me. Because I consider Wednesday as in the tomorrow Wednesday, this Wednesday, not next Wednesday. But some people consider next Wednesday the next Wednesday that comes. So clarity. Defined, specific, and clear. So again, this is just a quick illustration. It may sound minute, but I promise you, and I would love to hear some of the miscommunication issues that you may have had with people. But when you say, hey, this is due next Wednesday, when is next Wednesday? So what's the specific date? What time next Wednesday? Is it due at 12:01 a.m., beginning of business? You see sometimes people will say BOB, or end of day, EOD, or COB, close of business, because again, what are our business hours? Or is it by midnight? So you know what you mean and what you say, but if the person you're talking to doesn't, then you're not having, as they like to say on the court TV shows, a meeting of the minds. But again, one of the ways we can do that is by documentation. So what is documentation? Well, I'm always, I love to go to what Google says, right? Because that's where we get most of our information. But it says it's material that provides official information or evidence or that serves as a record. So what's the information on record? That's what documentation is. And so we need documentation for so many things, right? Documentation for performance, for receipts, who do we speak to, non-compliance, performance measurements, disciplinary action, the list goes on and on. And there's, of course, records protocol, like how long do we keep this documentation? But what is really documentation? So we talked about what it is, it's the official record. But another thing I think is important is just to even talk about first, like how do we do it? Where do you keep it? Is it just sticky notes on top of my computer? Well, potentially, but that's really not the best way to have documentation. So whenever we talk about things on these videos, I want to be clear and describe that I am describing a way, not the way. So this is some things that I've done that's been really easy for me. So a couple of things. I love notebooks. So here's an example of one. And these are some old ones, but I loved these because there was a section on the top, and maybe you can see that, where you can talk about meetings, like who was there. And then the other thing it talks about, it tells you the date, topic, the objectives, and what the notes were. So these are really cool. And then at the bottom, there's action items. But as a person who, they used to jokingly call me the queen of documentation, that really documents, this is really good for meetings, but it was also for every day. So one of the things that I used to do was just start a new notebook and write in it every day a new page. And when I was finished, on the cover, I would put, this is like volume, 1 of 20 or whatever. And so I might say, if this was the one I was starting today, I would say start date 9/24/19. If it was a work-related one or general notes, I would title what that was. And then whenever I wrote the last note on the last page. So theoretically, let's just say a notebook lasts me for 6 months. So in 6 months, we would be at March, maybe end of March. And let's say the last note I wrote in here was March 30. I would come back to the front of the notebook and then write, it would say 9/24/19 through 3/30/20. And then I put it in a stack. I need you to know that I have probably about 30, 40 notebooks easy. Because again, if I need to go back and reference something, I do. But it's little things like who called me, when they called me, what did we talk about? Literally every time my phone rang, I wrote a note. So it would say 9/24/19. Right now it's 3:45 a.m. If you called me and your name is Sarah, be like, Sarah called. And if whatever she wanted, RE, regarding the gist of our conversation, any key points. But that's my documentation. Because if something comes up later, I want to be able to refer to that and say, well, this was my takeaway. Not so much that I send Sarah an email every time, but it's just my record because, again, my memory is not perfect. And so it at least helps me if we get off or something goes awry to understand that. So that's one place I do it. Now, when I first moved to Memphis back in 2000 and first became an office head, one of the things I did was I bought all my supervisors' notebooks. Now, this is an illustration of a different type of notebook. It's more like a journal kind, but this is a good place to write notes when you just have specifically issues or discussions with employees. I bought all our supervisors, especially the frontline ones, little bitty notebooks, maybe like the width of a cell phone, but they could fit in your back pocket. They were actually green. And when I would see my supervisors, I would say to them, hey, where's your little green notebook? Because it's important that they kept it handy, because I promise you something's coming up and they would wish that they had something to document it on. Late delivery, dispute in the number of items delivered, whatever the case may be. So when you document, you have a record. And again, if you're doing it on a regular basis, then that's where you do it. And then, I go to a lot of conferences and stuff. It's not uncommon. So this was when I went to the Social Equity Conference at Rutgers, and Arizona State School of Public Affairs gave everybody notebooks. So I also host calls. And so I keep my notes from those calls and the date of the call and who was on the call, some of the things they talked about, because I want to remember what people share with me. I don't want them to have to feel like they have to retell me the whole story every time they get on a call with me, and I may not talk to them for weeks at a time. And so I say all that to say that's a little way for me to help. So documenting, these are just little illustrations of documenting. But the point I'm trying to make is it's important. If you are a supervisor and you don't like to document, you need to change that mindset. I give you my word when I say being documentable or documenting and being able to refer to things can be a game changer and lifesaver for you, your organization, your management style, your ability to sustain results. It can also help you because you never know what people are going to accuse you of. You also don't know 6 months from now what will come from this. 6 months. Sometimes it's 2 and 3 years. I could tell you some stories about how my documentation saved out my organization. Years later. Because again, you just don't know. And so if you get in the habit and learn how to document, you will find that one, is not as hard as it seems. It's not as time consumptive as sometimes we think that it is. And what you'll also find is it's a really great habit to have. So again, documentation is key for every supervisor. So today's lesson was more about where do we hold these documents. Stickies randomly on your desk is really not good because, there's no order, no logic. You could have made something up after the fact. So the value of using things like, these notebooks is, this is spiral. So there's no way for me to insert a page. And so there have been times during formal investigations and even some of these cases that went to like criminal court, my notebook was, Your Honor, we'd like to submit this as, Exhibit E. And so I was just glad that I had it. And so I say that to say, and in one particular case, it was the difference in between the defendant pleading guilty now versus saying he didn't do it, because the prosecution and the defense could both validate that based on ink, the age of the notebook, the flow of the pages, other things that I had done, that the documentation was legitimate and not falsified. So again, hope you're never in one of those situations, but you might be. So anyway, notebooks, journals, pads, things that are consistent. Tomorrow we'll talk about where do you keep these things and what type of documentation is relevant. But today we're just talking about documentation and places to use it. So again, little notebooks, big notebooks, little journal, it doesn't matter. But maintain and start today. Say, I'm going to start taking notes. So acquire something that allows you to do so and to do so in an effective way. My name is Angela Hooper-Menifield. This is your HR Moment from Menifield Associates, and I hope that I've been able to add value. And if you have any questions about documentation, this is one of my favorite subjects. Please let me know. Last thing I'll say about documentation is this. I've seen more organizations and individuals get in trouble for what they couldn't document. And what I mean by that is you can be right, but if you're not able to prove that you're right, you may as well be wrong sometimes. And so that's one of the values of documentation. Have a great day. Today's Tuesday, September 24th, 2019. Angela Hooper-Menifield, Menifield Associates. Take care. Bye-bye.